In this video, we'll be showing how you can use a lifetime matrix to calculate the daily metrics. The reason you might want to do this is because some social media connectors in Domo, like the Facebook connector or Instagram, will only give you the lifetime values for posts. What this means is that you'll not actually be able to see when a post started trending again, because you've only got the one value for the lifetime. If I have the daily values, that means we can see on a daily basis when metrics are going up or back down again. What we've got here is a sample output from the data flow. Here we've got 4 posts that were posted on the 2nd of November. And the dataset goes up to the 7th of November. You see here we've got 4 columns, we've got 6 columns. We've got the date, the post ID, impressions lifetime, likes lifetime, impressions daily and likes daily. Just to show an example of what's happening here, we'll select one of the posts. We'll select post 1. We can see here in the 2nd of November, when it was originally posted, 7 to 8 impressions lifetime, 3 likes lifetime. What's going to happen is we're just going to set each of these equal to each other. So we're going to set the daily impressions equal to the lifetime impressions, and the daily likes equal to the lifetime likes. This is just because there's no previous value to compare to, and so we just set them equal to each other. On the 3rd of November, we subtract the value from the day before from the current value, which gives us 56 for the impressions, and 1 for the likes, since it's 3 subtracted from 4. It's the exact same thing for the 4th as well. We'll see here there's no data for the 5th and 6th. The reason for this is because there's been no change in the lifetime values. It stayed as 139 during the 5th and the 6th, and then it's changed up to 141 on the 7th. Those rows have been removed. Now the 7th is being compared to the 4th, and we have 139 subtracted from 141, which gives 2 for the daily impressions, and this would just go on and on for as long as you'd like. The first thing we'll see here is that this is a recursive data flow. This means that the output is also the input. This recursive input up here is constantly being updated each day with page post lifetime metrics. In this example we're using Facebook. For Instagram you would use a completely separate data set. Another thing to note is that this is a sample connector which can actually be updated, or at least the metrics can't be updated. If you look at the data, you can see the date, post ID, and lots of different metrics here. Most of them to do with impressions. In reality, you'd want to use the Facebook connector to get this rather than the sample connector, because you'd want to get your actual values rather than sample data. The first thing we want to do before we move forward is to change the date column from a timestamp into a date. Once this is done, we can select the relevant columns. What we've done is selected date, post ID, and the lifetime values for impressions and likes. You can choose whatever values you like here, so you could choose total shares, paid impressions, unpaid impressions for example. And if you wanted, you can also add in some of the post content, but what you'd have to do there is you'd have to join in another data set first. The Facebook page post would be the one you'd maybe want to choose here. So this would just have to be joined beforehand before selecting the columns. The next step is to append rows. This means that we're joining the recursive data set with the more recent data set. Then we'll group by date and post ID. We'll be taking the maximum values for impressions lifetime and likes lifetime. The reason we do this is because if a data flow runs more than once a day, we might actually get duplicate values, so we want to make sure if it's run in the morning and run at night, and the dataset sitting behind it, like the page post lifetime matrix, has been updated, this means it will actually get the most recent values. The next step is to use the rank and window function, so both of these can be combined into one. In this first one, what we're doing is we're taking the lag for impressions. What this means is that the value from the previous date is being added in as a new entry on that row, which means we can directly subtract the current value from the value in the previous day. We're doing this for likes and for impressions. The sentence down the bottom here, we're ordering on date. In ascending order, the partition will be the post ID. This is just because we want the values to be unique for each post. We don't want to be comparing the impressions from one post to the impressions of another post from the day before. We want to make sure it's the exact same. Both areas rank and window tiles could be combined into one. I've kept them separate just to make it a bit easier to see. The second one we're going to use the dense rank. What this will do is it'll order based on the date for each post ID. For example, if a post was posted on the 2nd of November, that would be ranked 1. For day 2, it would be rank 2. For the 4th, it would be rank 3. For the 5th, it would be rank 4, for example. So this would happen for every single post because it's partitioned by post ID. The next step is to use the formula tool. This is where we actually calculate the impressions daily. What this code is actually saying here is that if it's the first day of a post, we set the lifetime values equal to the daily values. And if it isn't the first entry, then we just do the lifetime value for that date, subtract from the lifetime value from the day before. We just do the exact same for impressions and likes here. The next step is to split these into sections. The first one up here is when the date is equal to the 26th of November 2021. In our case, this is the first day in the data set. It will probably be completely different for yours. And this is all other dates except from the first day in the data set. So there's multiple ways you could try to find this date out. You could just go into your original data set and you could sort it based on date in a ascending order, and this way you'd get the first date showing up first. You could also use a formula tool or a group by to just make the data flow a bit more cluttered. Once we've got the data from the first date, we're going to set the daily values equal to 0. This is because we don't have a previous day to compare these to, and every other day going forward will have the real values. So as we mentioned before, this is all the data that's set from the first day in the data set. And for this section of the data, we're going to be removing any rows where the daily values for each of the metrics equal 0. So if both of them equal 0, we'll remove this row. The reason we've got this section and why we need to set these equal to 0 is because we need to have a baseline value to compare to. For example, if it stayed the same on the 3rd and 4th, those rows would be getting rid of, and then we'd have to keep the next day when it changes, and we need to have some value to compare the lifetime values to. This means it will have to have at least one entry of that post beforehand so that it can be compared. The next step is to append both these sets of data back together again. Then to select the columns we need and put it in a better order. You've got date, post ID, the lifetime metrics, and then the daily metrics. The last step here is to create an output. Once this has been done, the data flow is completed. Now, two things to make sure of. One of them is to make sure that this data set you've got here will be updating at the end of each day. So maybe say 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Just make sure that you've got the data for that day rather than it updating in the morning, and which would really just be giving you the data from the previous day plus the morning of that date. And another thing to make sure of is that your data flow updates based on when this one updates, which just means you just need to go into settings and you can select your data flow to run whenever this data set updates. One other thing to note is that this will only be useful for going forward, so you won't actually be able to get the lifetime metrics from historic dates. So if you started this on the 1st of December, for example, you would only see data going forward, the daily values going forward from the 1st of December, and you wouldn't actually be able to see the previous data before that. So this is the data flow completed. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I hope you found this video useful.